I was 47 years old when the phone call came. My name is Darren Foster, and for as long as I could remember, I had always put my career first. I had built my financial consulting business from the ground up, working late nights and making sacrifices that most people would consider unimaginable. I had done everything to ensure my success, and in the process, I had also provided for my family, especially my daughter, Ela. Ela was everything to me. She was the one bright spot in my life, my reason for pushing so hard to build the empire I had. I watched her grow up, a smart, compassionate, independent woman, and she always made me proud. When she married Riley, I was thrilled for her. Riley was the kind of man I thought would be good for her, charming, ambitious, and well-spoken. He seemed to check all the boxes. But there was something about him that never quite sat right with me. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, the way he always seemed more interested in the material trappings of life than in the deeper things, like family, loyalty, or love. I brushed those thoughts aside. After all, Ela was happy, and that was what mattered most. But then, one afternoon, my world was turned upside down when I got that call. I was sitting in a boardroom with my partners, discussing a crucial $100 million merger, when my phone buzzed. I saw Ila's name on the screen. There was a tight knot in my stomach. Something told me it wasn't good news. I excused myself from the meeting, my mind already racing. I answered, and her voice came through, small, fragile, filled with terror. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm at the hospital. The doctors say the baby's coming early. There are some complications. I'm going into surgery now, a C-section." I could barely process what she was saying. Time seemed to freeze. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my breath, shallow and fast. I didn't even think twice. I stood up, told my colleagues that I needed to leave, and made the decision that would alter everything. "The deal's off," I said, walking out of the room without a second glance. There was no question. My daughter needed me. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to be there for her, no matter what. It took 4 long hours to get to Chicago, where Ila and Riley lived. Those hours felt like an eternity. As the plane sped across the sky, I kept trying to reach Riley. His phone went straight to voicemail every time I called. I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread, a gnawing feeling that something was wrong. Riley always claimed to be caught up in work, a phrase that had started to grate on me over time. But now, as I was racing to the hospital, I feared it might be more than just a convenient excuse. I had never trusted him completely, and in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that my gut was right. He was always more interested in appearances, in the luxuries that came with success, than in the people who truly mattered. But Ela, she was everything to me. When I arrived at the hospital, I rushed straight to the maternity ward. But when I got there, the waiting room was eerily quiet, empty, except for a few nurses and staff. I approached the desk, desperate for information. When I asked about Ila, the nurse's expression shifted. She looked at me with sympathy, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't quite place. She hesitated before speaking, her voice soft. "She's in surgery now, Mr. Foster. She's been in there for about an hour. And no, I'm afraid her husband hasn't been here. She's been alone." My heart sank. Alone? My daughter, in the middle of a medical emergency, had been left by the one person who should have been there for her. The man she had trusted, the man I had reluctantly accepted into our family. But this was unforgivable. My worst fears were coming to life, and in that moment, I knew I had to act. I stood there, frozen for a moment, the weight of what I'd just heard sinking in. Alone. Ila had been alone in surgery for the past hour, and Riley, her husband, the man I had tried to trust, was nowhere to be found. My stomach twisted in knots. How could he have abandoned her like this? How could he not be here with her, by her side, during the most crucial moment of her life and their child's? I walked to a chair in the corner, trying to steady my breathing. The anger, the betrayal, it was all bubbling inside me. But I had to keep calm. Ila needed me now more than ever. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, my fingers stiff as I scrolled through my contacts. I tried Riley's number again. This time, he picked up after the first ring, his voice too bright, too casual. "Hey, Darren," he said. "How's it going, man?" My chest tightened at the sound of his voice. I could hear the clinking of glasses in the background, the low hum of music, the laughter of people, a party, the unmistakable sound of celebration. I felt my pulse quicken, and a wave of disgust washed over me. "Where are you, Riley?" I asked, keeping my voice tight but controlled, though I could feel the rage building beneath the surface. "Oh, celebrating," he said, his voice filled with laughter. "We just closed a big deal today. Thought I'd unwind a bit. Everything's fine, though. Don't worry, I'm on my way." I could hear the sounds of glasses clinking and people talking over each other. It was like a slap in the face. My daughter, my Isla, was in the operating room, fighting for her life and the life of her child, and Riley was celebrating some deal. "Your wife, Riley," I said, my voice now low and measured, though every word felt like it was being ripped from my chest. "She's in the middle of emergency surgery right now, and you're at a celebration?" There was a long pause on the other end, and then Riley let out a dismissive laugh, like it was no big deal. Yeah, I know. I'll get there in a little bit. But hey, this is important, right? It's for the family," he said, as if that made everything okay. I closed my eyes, my fingers gripping the phone tightly as the anger inside me boiled over. I had heard enough. This was it. This was the moment when I realized that Riley would never be the man I thought he was. He wasn't a protector. He wasn't a partner to my daughter. He was a fraud. "I see," I said, my voice now calm but icy. I hung up the phone without another word. I stood there for a moment, trying to compose myself, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But there was no sense to be made. Riley had made his choice, and now I was going to make mine. I didn't hesitate. I took a deep breath, my mind already racing with the decisions I needed to make. I walked over to the nearest payphone, fumbling with my wallet as I dialed the number of Graham, my personal financial advisor, the one person I could trust to handle something like this. "Graham," I said, my voice cold and firm, "I need you to do something for me. It's urgent." I could hear the hesitation in Graham's voice, but he didn't question me. "What do you need, Darren?" he asked. "I want you to freeze the joint account I set up for Isla and Riley. Immediately," I said, my tone unwavering. "And then transfer everything into a new account. Make sure Riley has no access. The new trust is for Isla and the baby. He's out." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line before Graham responded, his voice cautious but compliant. "I understand," he said. "I'll handle it right away." I hung up the phone, the weight of my decision settling over me. The rage still simmered inside me, but it was mixed with something else now, a sense of finality. Riley's whole life, the luxury car, the expensive apartment, the lavish vacations, was about to come crashing down, and it was all his fault. I walked back to the waiting area, trying to push all thoughts of Riley out of my mind. I had to focus on Isla now. I had to be strong for her. A few minutes later, a surgeon in blue scrubs appeared in the doorway. She had a warm, exhausted smile on her face, and she walked toward me with a sense of calm that I couldn't quite understand. "Mr. Foster," she said, "Isla is stable now. The surgery was complicated, but she's a fighter. Your granddaughter is here. She's perfect." Relief flooded through me, so overwhelming that my knees almost buckled beneath me. My daughter was going to be okay. My granddaughter was here. In the midst of everything, in the midst of the pain and betrayal, there was this tiny, beautiful life. I followed the doctor to the nursery, my heart racing with anticipation. When I saw my granddaughter for the first time, my breath caught in my throat. She was so small, so delicate, her tiny hands curled into little fists. I stood there for a long moment, watching her, and in that instant, I knew I had done the right thing. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it all felt far away now. All that mattered was this little girl, and I swore in that moment that I would do whatever it took to protect her, to make sure she never felt the kind of pain Ayla had felt in the last few hours. And I knew one thing for certain. Riley would never be part of that protection. Not anymore. I stood by the nursery window, watching my granddaughter's tiny chest rise and fall with each gentle breath. The sight of her, so small, so perfect, brought a sense of peace that I hadn't known I needed. For the first time in what felt like forever, everything else seemed to fade away. The anger I had felt earlier, the betrayal, the frustration, all of it seemed so distant in that moment. I had promised myself I would protect Isla and her child, and now, holding that promise in my heart, I felt a sense of purpose I had never known. But then I heard the sound of the elevator doors opening. I turned around to see Riley strolling down the hallway, his expensive suit looking out of place in the sterile environment of the hospital. His slick-back hair, his confident swagger, it all felt so wrong in the face of what had just happened. He looked like a man who had just come from a five-star lunch, not the hospital where his wife was fighting for her life and their baby was just born. "Hey, Darren," Riley called out, his voice far too loud for the quiet hospital corridor. His usual grin was plastered across his face as he approached, holding a bouquet of flowers in his hand. I could smell the faint scent of champagne on him, and I wanted to throw up. "Look at you, man. The big grandpa now, huh? So, where's the little one?" His voice echoed off the walls as he walked past me and into the room. I stayed where I was, rooted to the spot, my hands clenched into fists by my sides. Ela looked at him when he entered, her face pale, her eyes tired but sharp. There was a coldness in her gaze that I had never seen before. It was as if the last shreds of the woman she had once been, timid and always seeking his approval, were being replaced by something stronger, something that had grown from the pain of the past few hours. "Ela, baby, how are you?" Riley asked, his voice far too casual. "I just got back from celebrating. This deal, man, it's huge. I can't believe we closed it today. It's a win for the family." Ela didn't respond immediately. She just stared at him, her expression emotionless. Finally, after a long pause, she spoke in a voice that was flat, almost detached. "She's in the nursery, Riley," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "The baby's in the nursery." Riley smiled and started to move towards the door, but before he could reach it, a nurse stepped into the room. She was holding a tablet in her hands, her expression polite but businesslike. "Mr. and Mrs. Foster," the nurse said, addressing both of us, but her gaze lingering on Riley. "Before we can admit your daughter to the neonatal unit for observation, hospital policy requires a deposit for the initial costs of the emergency surgery and related care. The deposit will be $25,000. Riley didn't flinch. Of course he wouldn't. This wasn't his first time using a credit card to flex in front of people. He pulled out his wallet with exaggerated ease, his posture still that of the successful businessman, trying to show me how much he had it all together. He handed the nurse his platinum card with a confident grin. "Put it on this," he said, dismissing the situation as if it were a mere inconvenience. The nurse swiped the card, and I could feel the tension in the air as we waited. But then a soft beep cut through the silence, and the nurse's expression changed. She looked at the screen, her brow furrowing in confusion. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice professional but now carrying an undertone of concern. "It's been declined." Riley didn't seem fazed. "What?" he said dismissively. "Run it again. There must be some mistake." The nurse obliged, swiping it once more. The same result. The same beep. She looked up again. "Sir, there are insufficient funds in the account," she said, her voice now a little more distant, but still professional. Riley's face, once full of smug confidence, suddenly drained of color. He fumbled with his phone, checking the balance of his account with trembling fingers. I could see the panic starting to take over his usually composed demeanor. "This can't be happening," he muttered, almost to himself. "There must be some mistake." I watched him, unable to contain the feeling of satisfaction that washed over me. All those years of watching him live off Isla's inheritance, of him strutting around like he was untouchable, suddenly, it was all crumbling down in front of him. And he had no idea how to handle it. I didn't say anything. I just walked over to the nurse, pulled out my own black card, and handed it to her. "Put the deposit on this," I said, my voice calm, but carrying the weight of everything that had led up to this moment, and send all future bills for Isla and my granddaughter to my office. The nurse nodded, clearly relieved, and processed the transaction quickly. Riley just stood there, his phone still in his hand, staring at the screen in disbelief. His entire world, built on the lie of wealth and easy money, was falling apart. "Riley," I said, my voice quiet but firm as I turned to face him, "the account is closed. All the money you've been living off was never yours. It was mine. I gave it to you to protect my daughter. But now you've proven beyond any doubt that you don't deserve it. You've chosen your parties over her health. From this moment on, you're on your own." I watched as the color drained from his face, and I knew he finally understood the gravity of what had just happened. He was a man whose life had been built on illusion and entitlement, and now that illusion had been shattered. I turned my back on him, walking to Isla's side where I could finally hold my granddaughter. The worst part of all of this was that I had hoped for so long that Riley would be the man I had imagined. But the truth was undeniable. He wasn't. And in that moment, I knew I had to do whatever it took to ensure Isla and her child were safe, even if it meant cutting Riley out of their lives completely. The silence in the hospital room was heavy after my words sank in. Riley, who had been so sure of himself just moments before, now stood frozen in place. His eyes darted from me to Isla, and I could see the mix of disbelief and panic in them. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue, to try and make it right, but he couldn't. His reality had just come crashing down, and it was a reality he wasn't prepared to face. Isla, on the other hand, didn't even flinch. She had gone through a hell of her own in the past few hours, and yet here she was, stronger than I had ever seen her, no longer the woman who had blindly put up with Riley's selfishness. She wasn't looking at him with the same adoration she once had. There was no more guilt or self-doubt in her eyes, just an exhausted, quiet strength. It was like watching someone emerge from the fog, slowly becoming themselves again after years of compromise. I sat down beside Isla's bed, carefully cradling my granddaughter in my arms, and for the first time today, I felt the overwhelming rush of love and relief. She was so tiny, so fragile, but she was here, alive, perfect. And I knew in that moment that nothing else in this world mattered more than her and her mother. Riley could try to salvage whatever was left of his image, but it wouldn't change what had already happened. Riley finally broke the silence with a weak laugh, trying to regain some semblance of control. "I don't understand, Darren," he muttered, still staring at his phone, his fingers trembling as he tapped the screen, his face turning pale as he checked his account balance again. "The money? It's all gone. Where did it go?" I didn't answer right away. There was no need to. He already knew. The account had been closed. His easy access to everything he had grown accustomed to had been severed in an instant, and now he was left with nothing. Just like his empty promises and his selfish actions had left Isla, nothing but disappointment and pain. The truth hit him harder than anything I could have said. Watching him stumble over his own words, trying to hold on to some dignity that was already slipping away, was almost painful. But I had no sympathy left. He had shown me who he truly was, and I wasn't going to backpedal or give him a way out. Not this time. "You really thought I wouldn't notice, didn't you?" I finally said, my voice quiet but filled with a quiet force. "You thought I wouldn't see that you were more in love with the life my money provided than with Isla, with our family. But you made one mistake. You underestimated me. You underestimated how far I would go to protect her." Riley's eyes widened, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in them. It was a look I had never expected to see on him. This man, who had always walked with such confidence, who had thought his charm could carry him through anything, was now a man on the verge of losing it all. "Darren, please," he said, stepping forward, but I raised a hand, cutting him off. "No, Riley," I said, shaking my head. "This is where it ends. You don't get to keep pretending anymore. You don't get to use Isla as your ticket to a better life while she's left behind, dealing with everything on her own. She deserves better. And now, she'll get better." He looked at Isla again, his expression faltering, but she didn't respond. She didn't have to. She had already said everything with her silence. Riley didn't know what to say. For the first time, he was faced with the consequences of his actions, and the weight of it was too much for him to handle. He stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily, his gaze flicking between Isla and the baby, before he muttered something under his breath. "I'll fix this," he said, though the words lacked conviction. "I'll make it right. I'll do better." But I knew, just like Isla did, that it was too late. The man who had been so easily swept into the whirlwind of his own ambition, so willing to leave his wife behind for the sake of his own success, had finally hit the wall. There was no going back. "I don't think you can fix this," I said quietly, my voice steady as I gazed at him. "You can't undo what you've done. But you can try to be the man Hila and this baby deserve, if that's even possible. But make no mistake, Riley, if you don't, you'll lose them both. And that will be your choice, not mine. His face twisted with something like regret, but I wasn't fooled. His regret was for himself, not for what he had done to Isla, and that was all that needed to be said. He stood there, finally realizing that his world was shifting in ways he couldn't control. He turned and walked out, his shoulders slumped. I knew he would try to fight for a while, try to salvage his position in Isla's life, but I also knew it wouldn't last. Not unless he changed in ways that he had never shown before. I looked at Isla, her gaze still distant, but somehow clearer than it had ever been. She wasn't broken anymore. She was finding her strength. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a quiet sense of hope. Isla wasn't the same person who had married Riley all those years ago. She was stronger now, more aware of her worth, and she was going to make sure her daughter grew up in a world where she knew the value of love, loyalty, and hard work. As I held my granddaughter close, I realized that despite everything that had happened, this moment, this new life, was the real victory. It wasn't the end of Riley or the loss of his wealth. It was the beginning of something new for Isla and her daughter. And that, in the end, was the greatest thing I could ever give them. Weeks passed, and the hospital room seemed a world away from the cold, sterile place where everything had fallen apart. Isla had recovered remarkably well, her strength returning in quiet waves as she settled into the new life she was building for herself and her daughter. Riley, for all his promises, had done exactly what I had expected. He tried to re-enter their lives with the same arrogant swagger, as if he could pick up where he left off, but Isla saw through him now. She wasn't the woman who had married him with stars in her eyes anymore. She was stronger, wiser, and that was something Riley would never be able to take away from her. The change in Isla was evident. I saw it in the way she carried herself, in the way she spoke about her daughter, Lily, and in the way she handled Riley's attempts to worm his way back into their life. At first, she had been torn. There were moments of weakness when she longed for the man she had once loved, and as the man who had made her believe he was the one she could build a life with. But those moments passed quickly. The woman I saw now was not the woman Riley had known, and that gave me a quiet sense of pride. As for Riley, it didn't take long for him to realize that his world had changed. The lavish lifestyle he had once enjoyed had vanished. The expensive car, the luxury apartment, the fancy dinners, all of it was gone. He had been left with nothing but his own choices. He sold the car, the last piece of his ego, and took a job at a small sales firm, the kind of job that made him roll his eyes in disdain when he used to talk about work. He had no choice but to learn what it meant to actually work for a living, something he had never done before. But that wasn't enough to change him, not yet. I knew that much. Riley still had that edge of entitlement, the belief that somehow he deserved more than he had earned. That, I feared, was what would keep him from truly growing. Even as he worked to rebuild what he had lost, I could see the frustration in him, the way he would lash out when things didn't go his way, the way he would try to project an image of success even though it was so painfully clear he had nothing left. I'd had enough of him to last a lifetime. My job was done, and now it was time to step back and let Isla make the decisions for her own life, without interference from anyone. She had grown into someone I could be proud of, someone who understood that love wasn't about being swept off your feet by grand gestures and expensive promises. It was about the quiet moments, the support, the sacrifices that didn't come with a price tag. And she was teaching me that there were things more important than my own fears of failure, more important than wealth or business deals. There was Lily. There was Isla's future, their future, and that was where my focus needed to be. One evening, about a month after everything had unfolded, I sat down in Isla's modest living room, my granddaughter nestled in my arms. It was a simple room, nothing like the grand spaces I was used to. The walls were adorned with family pictures, some old, some new. It was clear Isla had put her heart into making it a home. There was laughter now, real laughter, not the forced smiles of a family living under the weight of expectations. The air was light. I could feel the change in the space, and I knew it wasn't just the decor. It was Isla. I don't know what to say, Dad, Isla said, looking at me from across the room. She was sitting on the couch, her hand resting on Lily's tiny head as she slept peacefully in the crib beside her. You've done so much for me, for Lily. I don't know if I could have made it through without you. I shook my head, smiling at her. You're stronger than you think, Isla. You've always been. I just gave you a little push when you needed it. She looked at me, her eyes soft with gratitude. I don't think I realized how much I needed it. I was so caught up in what I thought was right, in what I thought love should look like. But now I see it, Dad. Love isn't supposed to feel like a weight. It's supposed to be light, freeing. It's supposed to make you feel stronger, not weaker. I nodded, my chest swelling with pride. She was right. She had learned the hardest lesson anyone could ever learn, and she had done it with grace. It was a lesson I had spent years trying to understand myself. Love, real love, wasn't about control or dependence or grand gestures. It was about supporting each other, standing by each other's side when it mattered most, and knowing when to let go. I didn't need to say anything more. She knew. We both did. Riley wasn't the answer to her happiness. She was, and she had found that out in the most difficult way. As I sat there with Lily in my arms, watching Ela, I felt a peace settle over me. The storm had passed. Things weren't perfect. They never would be. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were all heading in the right direction. There was a sense of stability, a quiet promise that no matter what happened in the future, we would be okay. And for the first time, I felt like I could let go of the worry that had consumed me for so long. I had done what I needed to do. Now, it was Isla's turn to take the reins, to build her life on her own terms, and I would be there, every step of the way, watching her grow into the woman I always knew she could be. This was her journey now, and I was finally ready to let her take it. It had been nearly 6 months since that chaotic night at the hospital, and life had settled into a new, quieter rhythm. The kind of rhythm I had always avoided, focusing instead on the constant rush of business deals, the noise of success, and the pressure of financial responsibilities. But now, sitting in Isla's living room, watching her feed Lily, my heart swelled with pride. This was the life I had always wanted for her, not the one tied to material wealth and external appearances, but a life grounded in love, security, and purpose. Riley had, surprisingly, continued to make progress. After the disastrous fallout, he had taken a step back. At first, I had wondered whether this shift was genuine or just another attempt to restore his pride, but as time went on, I could see the change in him. It wasn't dramatic, and it wasn't instant, but he had taken responsibility for his actions in a way that surprised me. He was working hard now, not just for his own benefit, but for Ela and Lily, even if the process of proving himself would take years. It wasn't perfect. He still had his flaws, and I still didn't fully trust him, but I had to admit that he was trying. The man who had once been so consumed by the luxuries of his lifestyle was now struggling to adapt to a more humble existence. I saw it in the way he spoke about work, the pride he took in providing for his family, the small sacrifices he made. It wasn't the man I had hoped for initially, but it was better than what I had expected after everything that had happened. But the true victory, the one that I didn't expect, was seeing Isla find her strength. I had always known her as a smart, capable woman, but the version of her I saw now was different. It was like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't defined by Riley anymore. She wasn't waiting for someone to take care of her or validate her worth. She had found that validation within herself. She had found her own voice, and it was louder than I had ever heard it before. I watched as she balanced being a new mother with going back to work part-time. It wasn't easy, but she handled it with a grace that left me speechless. She had always been kind-hearted, but now there was a fierce confidence in her that I hadn't recognized before. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. The more I watched her, the more I saw the woman she had become. A woman who had learned from her mistakes, who had grown stronger from her struggles, and who was now ready to face whatever came next with her own determination. One evening, we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset as Lily slept soundly inside. It was a peaceful moment, the kind I hadn't had in a long time. Ela turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "Dad," she began, her voice soft, but there was a certainty behind it. I've been thinking a lot lately about everything that's happened, about Riley and me, about you. She paused, and I could see the weight of it all in her eyes. I don't know if I could ever thank you enough for everything you've done, for stepping in when I didn't know what to do, for standing by me even when things were falling apart. I looked at her, smiling softly. You don't need to thank me, Isla. I did what any father would do. I love you, and I'll always be here for you. But you've done all the hard work. You've found your way. You've rebuilt your life, and you've done it on your terms. She sighed, a contented smile spreading across her face as she looked down at her hands. I didn't realize it before, but I think I've spent most of my life living for other people. I wanted to make everyone proud. I wanted to make Riley happy. I wanted to be the perfect daughter. But now, I'm finally doing something for myself. I'm not afraid to say no anymore. I'm not afraid to put my own happiness first, and I'm not afraid to walk away from things that don't serve me. My heart swelled at her words. This was the daughter I had always hoped for, the one who didn't just rely on others for validation, but knew her own worth. I'm proud of you, Isla, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You've done more than anyone could have expected. You've built a life for yourself and Lily that's full of love and strength. You've shown me what true courage looks like. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the sky turn darker as the evening settled in. It was a quiet night, but it felt like everything was in its place. Isla was at peace, and I was beginning to find my own peace too. There was still a long road ahead, and Riley's redemption was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of worry pressing down on me. I didn't feel the need to fix everything, to control everything. I could finally let go and just be there for my daughter, supporting her as she navigated her own life. That night, as I went to bed, I couldn't help but smile. It had been a long journey, one full of unexpected turns. But in the end, the love I had for Isla and Lily was enough to guide us through. And now, all I could do was watch as Isla embraced the life she had built for herself, a life full of strength, love, and the promise of a brighter future. It had been nearly a year since that night at the hospital, and so much had changed in our lives. The dust had settled, but the echoes of everything that had transpired still lingered, though they were less sharp now. Ela had settled into her new life, and I had finally accepted that the way I had been living, always thinking that success was defined by wealth and power, wasn't the only way. Riley, though still struggling in his own way, had made some effort to adjust, to prove that he was capable of change, even if it was slow and hesitant. But Ela? She had blossomed, and that was the greatest relief of all. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I found myself sitting on the couch with Lily in my arms, watching her try to grab at the colorful toy in front of her. Her tiny hands were full of wonder as she explored the world in her own way. I smiled to myself, watching her so absorbed in her world, oblivious to the complexities that came with being an adult. As much as I wanted to protect her from the difficulties I had faced, I knew that someday she would need to learn them too. But for now, I could simply enjoy these moments, the simple joy of being with my granddaughter, and knowing that Ella was well on her way to building a future filled with love and strength. Isla came into the living room, looking tired but content. She had been balancing work and motherhood, and I could see the toll it sometimes took on her. But there was something different about her now. She wasn't the same woman I had worried about all those months ago, unsure of herself and always trying to make things work with Riley for the sake of peace. Now there was a quiet confidence in her. She had found her voice, not just as a mother, but as a woman who understood what she needed and wasn't afraid to pursue it. "Hey, Dad," Isla said, her voice warm but tired as she sat beside me on the couch. "How's my little angel doing?" "She's perfect," I replied with a grin, looking down at Lily, who was now trying to chew on the toy. "She's growing too fast." Isla laughed softly, her hand resting gently on Lily's head. "I know. It feels like she was just born yesterday." She paused, glancing over at me with a thoughtful look. "I've been thinking a lot about how far I've come in the past year. I didn't even realize it at the time, but everything's different now. I'm different." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw the change too. The woman sitting beside me wasn't just a new mother. She wasn't just the woman who had gone through the pain of a difficult marriage. She was someone who had faced those challenges and had come out stronger for it. There was a resilience in her, a kind of grace that I hadn't seen before. "You've always been strong, Isla," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But you're right, there's something different about you now. Something more confident, more sure of yourself, and it's beautiful to see." She smiled, her eyes softening as she gazed at Lily. "I think I've finally figured out what matters. For so long, I tried to make everything perfect, tried to make everyone happy, but the truth is, I can't do that. I had to learn to be okay with not having it all together, to stop trying to please everyone else and focus on what makes me happy. I think that's what really made the difference. I started putting myself and Lily first." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "That's the most important lesson, Isla. You've built something real here. You've created a life that's full of love and strength, and you've done it on your terms." She looked at me, her expression both proud and humble. "I wouldn't have been able to do it without you, Dad. You've always had my back. You've always been there when I needed you, and I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you for that." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "You don't need to repay me. Seeing you happy, seeing you become the woman you are now, that's all the repayment I need." The room felt still for a moment, and I realized that for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe easy. The fear that had gripped me for so long, the fear of Riley's influence, the fear that Ela might not find her way, was gone. Isla had found her strength, and Riley, though still a work in progress, had proven that he was trying. For the first time, there was hope for them both. Isla got up to check on Lily, her movements gentle, and I watched her with a sense of deep pride. I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but I also knew that no matter what happened, Isla was ready. She had learned the hardest lessons in the toughest ways, but she had come out stronger. And as I sat there, watching my daughter and granddaughter, I realized that this moment, this peace, this family, was everything I had ever wanted. The rest was just noise. It was all worth it. All the mistakes, all the struggles, every bit of pain, it had led me to this point. And for the first time, I truly felt like I had done the right thing. In life, it's essential to understand that true success isn't defined by wealth or external achievements, but by the strength of your relationships, the integrity you uphold, and the love you give and receive. We often spend so much time trying to please others or chasing things that don't truly fulfill us. But the real fulfillment comes from knowing your worth, prioritizing those who matter most, and finding peace in being true to yourself. Don't be afraid to let go of toxic relationships, even when they seem comfortable, and don't settle for less than what you deserve. It's okay to make mistakes along the way, but always learn from them and use those lessons to grow. Surround yourself with people who support and respect you, and never lose sight of what truly brings you happiness. Life can be unpredictable, and the journey is never linear, but embracing change, facing challenges head-on, and staying true to your values will lead you to a life full of purpose and contentment. Trust yourself, take risks, and remember that the most important thing you can do is love yourself and others unconditionally. That's where true strength and fulfillment lie.